Hello everyone, welcome back to Real Life. I hope you're having a wonderful day. If you enjoy these vintage episodes, hit the like button. That helps promote them to like-minded viewers like yourself. Subscribe and you'll be notified of new episodes. There's something new and different every weekend. Today's episode is a Canadian treasure, rare color footage of the final competition for the International Fisherman's Trophy between the American schooner Gertrude L. Thebaud and the Bluenose. The Bluenose was a fishing and racing gaff rig schooner built in 1921 in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. A celebrated racing ship and fishing vessel, the Bluenose, under command of Angus Walters, became a provincial icon for Nova Scotia and an important Canadian symbol in the 1930s, serving as a working vessel until she was wrecked in 1946. Nicknamed the Queen of the North Atlantic, she was later commemorated by the Bluenose I design sloop in 1946 and a replica, Bluenose II, in 1963. The name Bluenose originated as a nickname for Nova Scotians from as early as the late 18th century. Emmanuel Hahn's design of a fishing schooner under full sail was introduced in 1937 for the Royal Canadian Mint, and we have had pocket change with the iconic Bluenose ever since. The vessel was also portrayed on the Bluenose 50-cent definitive postage stamp issued by the Canadian Post Office on 8 January 1929, as part of the King George V scroll issue. The schooner has been featured on the 1982 60-cent stamp that commemorated the International Philatelic Youth Exhibition, and is featured on the 1988 37-cent stamp that celebrated Bluenose skipper Angus Walters. After a season of fishing on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland under the command of Angus Walters, Bluenose set out to take part in her first International Fisherman's Cup. The International Fisherman's Cup was awarded to the fastest fishing schooner that worked in the North Atlantic deep-sea fishing industry. The fastest schooner had to win 2 out of 3 races to claim the trophy. The Canadian elimination race to determine who would represent Canada in the 1921 International Fisherman's Trophy race off Halifax, Nova Scotia, took place in early October. A best 2 out of 3 competition, Bluenose won the first 2 races easily. Bluenose then defeated the American challenger Elsie for the International Fisherman's Trophy, returning it to Nova Scotia in October 1921. The following year, Bluenose defeated the American challenger Henry S. Ford, this time in American waters off Gloucester. Henry S. Ford had been constructed in 1921 based on a design intended to defeat Bluenose. Fishing schooners became obsolete during the 1930s, displaced by motor schooners and trawlers. Salt cod, the main fishing industry in the North Atlantic, had been surpassed by the fresh fish industry, requiring faster vessels. In 1933, Bluenose was invited to the World's Fair in Chicago, stopping in Toronto on her return voyage. In 1935, Bluenose sailed to Plymouth after being invited as part of the Silver Jubilee of King George V. During her first visit, she took part in a race with schooner yachts, specifically designed for racing. Bluenose came in a respectable third. In 1937, Bluenose was challenged once more by the American schooner Gertrude L. Thebaud in a best-of-5 series of races for the International Fisherman's Trophy. However, the financial difficulties of the owners of Bluenose almost prevented the race from going ahead. Furthermore, Bluenose's sailing gear had been placed in storage after the schooner had been refitted with diesel engines. It was only with the intervention of American private interests that Bluenose was made ready for the race. Beginning on 9 October 1938, the first race off Boston was won by Gertrude L. Thebaud. Bluenose won the second, which was sailed off Gloucester, but a protest over the ballast aboard Bluenose led to a modification to the schooner. She was found to be too long at the waterline for the competition. The alterations completed, Bluenose won the third race, sailed off Gloucester, by an even greater margin than the second race. During the fourth race sailed off Boston, the topmast of Bluenose snapped, which contributed to Gertrude L. Thebaud's win. The fifth race, sailed off Gloucester, was won by Bluenose, retaining the trophy for the Nova Scotians. This was the last race of the fishing schooners of the North Atlantic. During the Second World War, Bluenose remained at dock in Lunenburg. No longer profitable, the vessel was sold to the West Indies Trading Company in 1942. The vessel was once again stripped of masts and rigging and converted to a coastal freighter for work in the Caribbean Sea, carrying various cargoes between the islands. Laden with bananas, she struck a coral reef off Île aux Vaches, Haiti, on 28 January 1946. Wrecked beyond repair with no loss of life, the schooner was abandoned on the reef. The vessel broke apart and sank. Noted American sailor, author, and actor Sterling Hayden may have been serving as crew aboard the Thebaud during this race. Sterling Hayden would become a decorated Marine Corps officer and member of the OSS during the war. He later would have a distinguished film career in movies such as John Huston's Asphalt Jungle, Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, and Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, among many others. This is yet another case of fascinating connections and degrees of separation. This reel came from a significant collection I sourced in Boston some years ago. The family name was Reedy. It appears the father in the 1930s and 40s was employed by the United Fruit Company and traveled extensively. You can view more of the Reedy family episodes, from Colombia to Cuba to Mount Washington, in the notes below. I get the sense that Mr. Reedy was well connected given his coverage of the race and the company he's keeping. The man with the chairman forge hat is clearly important enough to be identified. The name of the vessel they were aboard during the race is unknown. That information may be found in long-forgotten records waiting to be rediscovered in a Boston area archive. There is also at least 1 or 2 U.S. Navy officers aboard. There's possibly much more to the footage than we currently realize. This rare color footage is a wonderful and important part of Canadian history. Rare because Kodachrome color film had only been made available by Kodak in 1935. As you can imagine, it was quite expensive, especially during the Depression. When I first viewed this footage a few years ago, I was challenged to identify the images. Slowly, the clues revealed themselves to my delight. That this 87-year-old footage survived all these years stored in a closet somewhere in Boston, only to be rediscovered, is particularly satisfying. However, I know for every film I find, so many more are simply tossed in a landfill. What images and history have been lost this way? We'll never know. I'll continue sourcing these old reels to restore and preserve them for future generations to enjoy. There may be enough background detail to possibly ID the coastal area more specifically. And finally, this curious vessel flying the Nova Scotia flag with text written on the rigging. Alone in a small sailboat, 25,000 miles unknown, navigator to complete this voyage, Atlantic, Caribbean, Pacific. Must have had an interesting backstory. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters, members, donors, and subscribers. It's a pleasure producing these fascinating little episodes. If you want to see more of these old reels restored and preserved, consider supporting by hitting the thanks button or becoming a monthly member. Your support will help preserve these old reels. Have a great day, be kind, and we'll see you again next time on Real Life.